The October 8th Audit Committee meeting. I'm Clarice Horner, Vice Chair, but I'll be running the meeting today. And first item on the agenda is the fiscal year 26 Audit Committee goals. I know we talked a little bit about the goals at the last meeting, and I want to kind of refresh your memory about some of that discussion. One of the goals we talked about was the risk assessment or budget impact, pretty much analyzing the impact budget reductions and what they've had on operations, financial accuracy, compliance, et cetera, is what goal one would kind of look like. Goal two is CPS Audit Committee Statement of Value. We talked extensively about the Statement of Value document or something formal. Says the Audit Committee values integrity, accountability, and transparency as essential to maintaining public trust and supporting the educational mission of Cincinnati Public Schools. We are committed to providing objective oversight that promotes sound financial management, strong internal controls, and compliance with laws and regulations. Through collaboration with district leadership, internal audit, and external auditors, we strive to strengthen governance, enhance operational effectiveness, and ensure the responsible stewardship of taxpayer resources for the benefit of CPS students and the community. Under that same vein with measuring value, we also talked about supporting the internal audit, KPI, and ROI initiatives. And then the third goal was financial guidance. So talking more or assisting or advising with levies, long-term planning as it relates to financial initiatives, et cetera. I know we asked if any of the board members had any additional goals or comments related to our discussions. I personally didn't hear anything back, but if you wanted to speak now or forever hold your peace, you could do so.
I'm on. I'm on. Thank you for that list. It seems very comprehensive and detailed and thorough, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Sure.
No? Okay. Are we okay with that? Are those goals? We do have to vote on them, so I just want to make sure everybody is, I got the thumbs up. Okay. All right. Well, that being said, I will take a motion to approve the fiscal year 2026 Audit Committee goals.
I motion to approve.
And second?
Second.
And we got the second. Do you have to do a roll call vote?
Yep, we can do a roll call vote. Clarice Warner,
Yes.
Rick Jeanette Addie Carson.
Yes.
Let's see, Laura here. Liz Guttridge,
Yes.
Kevin Huff. Sorry, let's see. Paul Kitzmiller.
Yes.
Jonathan Young.
Yes.
Mr. Craig.
Yes.
Mr. Crossett.
Yes.
Thank you. Passes.
All right, well, thank you all, thank you all. First thing I have to say. All right, next on our agenda is the Audit Committee and Internal Audit Charters. Yeah. No, here we go. Okay, so this charter was revised April 2025, and we are discussing these because
Yes, as part of the charter, we're required to annually review both the audit committee charter and internal audit charter.
Okay.
So we would be open to any thoughts, feedback, suggestions for edits to either charter. I will draw attention that the internal audit charter is actually now out of date as it refers to the Institute of Internal Auditors prior guidance and standards. So what they refer to as the Red Book, they recently released this past year a new version. So all of these terms that you kind of see under the authority and professionalism areas are truly out of date. However, since we're working this year on further implementing the audit standards and updating our manual, we thought it could be wise, rather than just changing the language, make sure we do a really thorough review of all standards to see if there are other requirements or things we may need to truly include in the charter so we don't have to come back twice for edits. So if the committee is comfortable, we can do a really thorough review throughout our project this year, and hopefully at the conclusion of the audit year, bring back comprehensive list of suggestions, and if there are any that happen to impact the audit committee charter as well.
I'm okay with that. Do we need to vote on that, or we're good? Okay. Thank you, ma'am. And membership update. So, I know we're losing one of our dear members. So Liz Kuttridge has decided, who has served with us for several terms and even in the vice chair role, has decided that this will be her last commitment, unless we can twist her arm and change her mind. But Dan, also, who is at his term as well for chair, has decided, or he plans to continue on with the committee for another term, but not in the chair role. So now is the time that I would like to ask you all to consider both chair and or vice chair roles, as well as think about, and we talked about this last meeting as well, if we need to open up and solicit for additional members for the committee. I guess right now we're kind of fine, but if something would happen that we may lose a member or the like, then we want to make sure that we are at close to our complement, so that, you know, we have quorums when we come and meet on our regularly scheduled meetings. So do we need to vote on that part as well?
I think an informal direction, if there's consensus among the group, we can then initiate, if we'd like to fill the role, we can initiate the posting of the application. The piece that we would like action on beyond that then is if anyone would like to be a part of the committee to review those applications, vet the applicants, and then bring forth to the December 10th meeting candidates for consideration by the broader committee. So kind of a twofold decision, if we would like to initiate the process, and if so, who would like to participate.
Okay, so we can have you think about that and then notify us if you're interested in any of those three areas, either running for a chair or vice chair position, considering additional folks so that we can prepare the documents and begin the application process, and or sitting on the committee to vet the committee members, and we all know how fun that is. So you can reach out to Lauren, you can reach out to me, or you can, Dan's still here, you can reach out to Dan. But just think about what you would like to do. Yes.
And if we could get a decision today whether we would like to open the application, then we can get the full group's direction, so we can make that decision right now if possible.
Okay, so like I said, we talked about it last meeting, just to make sure that we had enough people on the committee to satisfy quorums and such. What were your thoughts on opening up for additional members? I think we said two, just one? I thought it was two. Okay, just one. But if we had two equally great candidates, I remember something about two, but there, we didn't want to turn anybody away, so that was what the.
I think one of our considerations, as you mentioned as well, next year, I think we have 3 or 4 members who are completing their current term. We don't know what the intent of those members may be, but I think Dan Holthouse encouraged us to consider if one or two folks were not to return, we could all of a sudden be down a good amount. So I think, because I was saying, it's a lot of a process to go through for filling one position. And he said, yes, however, think to next year. So I think that was his thought there.
Okay. So what do you guys think about that?
I'm just trying to scan through the updated charter. We removed the language about a specific number of members, so we no longer have a minimum.
Correct. No longer have a minimum, but the maximum is 10 community
still have a
members.
maximum.
Yeah,
Okay.
so with Liz, this is being the concluding part of her term, we would have one vacancy to be in our maximum, so to speak.
Any other questions or thoughts? Oh, I'm sorry.
So I think, one question I did have was kind of like how many current members do we have? And I think, at least from what I'm hearing from Lauren, that we would probably be at 10 or if not 9-ish currently.
Currently, we have 10, and then with Liz rolling off, it would drop down to 9.
Okay. And I think one of the other things we clarified previously when we did the amendments to the charter was that it was the 10 in addition to the 3 board members that were a part of the audit committee. And so I think we're at 9 if we're potentially we may potentially have some folks who may step off next year. It is somewhat easier to do one process to gather all of those folks at one time, which is kind of what we just did, and gathered a couple people at once, than it would be to necessarily have to turn someone away and then ask them to come back a year later. That being said, I think we could also run for a year with 9 as opposed to 10, because I don't know if we've ever had a time where we've had all 10 be at every meeting, but I just would maybe put out there maybe the question to the team with also the fact that we are also down a person in internal audit, the amount of effort and time it would take to gather somebody. If we had 4 or 5 people again, that is a amount of labor on the internal audit folks as well to kind of spearhead that while they're down in person. So
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Craig. I don't think we need to open it up right now, and we'll just roll with the punches after we see what happens next year.
I don't feel like I could express an opinion, but for what it's worth, I feel like, we just added 2 new members, and I feel like 9 is, or did we add 3? 3, okay. And 9 feels like plenty, and especially if it might come up again next year, it seems to me like 9 is fine.
Okay. Yes.
I just wanted to thank Liz for her service. She's been an excellent member. I think you served
I have
as
one more meeting.
You served as, but I think you served as vice chair as part of your tenure here. So thank you very much. You've been a very good member. Appreciate it.
Okay. So we're all in agreement that we can push this off until next year? All right. So you can cross that one off.
Where will we revisit this?
We'll revisit this again this time next year. This essentially, we just update the dates on this timeline every year, and it's a rolling timeline. And then next year, the folks who have a term concluding December 31st of 26 are Kevin Hoffman, Seth Harmon. Let's see here. We've got Carol Mitchell Lawrence and Clarice Warner. Those are the terms concluding the end of calendar year 26.
A lot. Okay. Yeah, we will need it then. Okay. All right. Next on our agenda is the report card performance index by Amanda Vargas.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Amanda Varga. I'm one of the testing and assessment managers here with Cincinnati Public. So I was asked to come and talk to you a little bit about the performance index piece of the report card. So this is just a link to the public-facing report card. If you haven't seen it, feel free to get in there. You can see any district or school in the state of Ohio. Just wanted to make sure you had the link for where it actually is to see all the data. So the performance index is part of the achievement piece of the report card. It is weighted the same as the progress piece, and it's weighted, those two pieces are weighted higher than the other pieces of the report card. The achievement component is based solely on what it's called the performance index. And so what goes into the performance index is the percentage of Ohio State tests, so that's the third through eighth grade math, reading, and science tests, as well as the 6 high school end of course exams. And it's the percentage of those tests that fall into one of 6 categories. So untested, they did not take the test, and that counts for 0 points. Then there is limited, which is the lowest performance level, basic, proficient, accomplished, and advanced. And each of those levels has a weighting. So the percentage of tests that falls into limited is then multiplied by 0.3, basic is multiplied by 0.6, proficient is 1, accomplished 1.1, and then advanced 1.2. Those are all multiplied together, added up, and you get a certain number of points. That is your numerator. Then the denominator is the average of the performance index of the top 2% of schools or districts in the state. So it's a moving target every year. It's gone up a little bit every year, but it's gone up by about 0.5 point every year. You take the numerator, divide by the denominator, and you get a percentage. And that is what determines the rating on the achievement component of the report card. So this was CPS's rating this year. We were a 62.8%, which gave us a 2-star rating in achievement. The percentages for each of those categories are along the bottom. So a little under 3% of our students were untested. 35.5% of our tests were limited. 18.3 were basic, 17.1 were proficient, 12.2 accomplished, 13 advanced, and then there is a category called advanced plus. That's when a student scores advanced, but they're actually accelerated in a subject. You get like a little bump up for that. You actually get a bump up for anything that's above proficient. You get bumped up to the next performance level. So this is a complex chart, but this is actually the numbers that feed those percentages. So if you're thinking like, what do you mean? Like, what does 35% actually mean for limited tests? So this is along the bottom, you'll see those same percentages that fed the performance index. And so this is by grade level and subject area, how many students actually scored in each of these areas. Not every student is included in the calculation. They have to meet certain business rules to be included, such as being enrolled for what is considered a full academic year of time. They can't be a first or second year English language learner, first or second year in the United States, and a couple of other more nuanced business rules to be included. So it's not every single kid that takes the test. So this is a comparison of our 23-24 performance index score as compared to our 24-25. So we were 2 stars both years, but went up a little bit in our performance index calculation. We reduced the number of kids in limited, increased the number of kids proficient or better, and also reduced the number of untested kids because that gives us 0 points. And that is a very high-level, quick overview of the performance index. I don't know if there's questions that I can answer for y'all.
I have a question. You mentioned we are 2 stars. What is the maximum?
So you can get up to 5 stars.
5,
All
okay.
components of the report card can be rated up to 5 stars. And then the next threshold, which would be 3 stars, is a 70% performance index.
Okay.
I'd love just your overall reflections on this and thoughts for the future. What is reasonably attainable in a year, 3 years?
Yeah, great question. So the overall rating takes points from each component of the report card, and it's actually the percentage itself that contributes to the overall rating versus just like the stars themselves. So the next threshold for points is actually 65%. And given that we went up almost 3 percentage points between 23-24, if we had that same jump and increase, we could actually get above the next threshold to contribute more points to our overall rating, which would then increase our overall stars. So it's a little hard to just make a reasonable prediction when you're not really looking at, the kids who are in seats now and what their projections might be. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. But if we continue on the increases we have seen in the past and get above that 65% threshold, I think we'll be in a good spot for contributing to our overall rating. The other piece of it, I think that is really important is the progress piece, which looks at how students are, how their achievement is moving over time. And I think if we are in a place where if we can get that from 2 stars to 3 stars, which I do think is very realistic for us as a district, because progress will drive achievement. Growth is going to drive students moving up in performance levels, because if a student is scoring really low on a test, they can make a ton of growth in 1 year, and they can score limited in year 1 and still be limited in year 2, because just the way that the scale scores work on the test, it's a huge range of score that are limited. So a kid can start really low. They can make a lot of progress year over year, but it could take them a couple of years to get out of limited. So I prescribe to the idea that progress drives achievement. And so I think if we can get progress up, which, we're moving achievement, we will continue to move achievement in the way that it needs to go.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, what are we doing for the growth and development for our teachers to ensure the growth and development of our students?
Hi, everybody. So I hope you can hear me. Is it okay? Nope, I need the microphone. Yes. So in the spring, the senior leadership team reviews the preliminary data that we get, and then we begin to have conversations to address just your very question. And so it drives the professional development that we plan and sometimes offer in the summer, and then in early August as teachers and principals begin to come back to school. And then that professional development translates to the teachers, and then they implement it in the classroom. But we don't just leave it at the professional development and for the teachers to implement. The follow-up is some supports that we have here centrally that are out in the schools to be able to answer any continuing questions. It's almost like, when you're taking the class, you think you understand, but then actually putting it into practice may be a different challenge. And so we do have support here in CPS and at the district level to support teachers in the implementation. And so to keep a close eye on just what Ms. Vargo was explaining, we do have benchmark testing throughout the school year to give us an idea of what progress the students are making. And so if they are making great progress, we continue that work. We provide them with enrichment opportunities. If we see that there are still some gaps, then there are pieces that we can put in place in order to close that gap and make sure that the kids are being successful for the upcoming fall for 3rd grade reading, and then in the spring again for all other testing.
Any other questions, comments? Okay.
I'm happy to make a comment as well now. This district has some reservations about the state report card for any number of reasons, but we are glad that the administration and the board is concentrating on much of it, especially as we know we're going to be before the public this November and in all likelihood next November as well. If you see the literature for the preschool promise levy, you will see that we continue to say that of the urbans of Ohio, we are highest achieving. Is that correct? That is correct. And I'm not sure if it's on the literature. I think we asked it to be. I believe 2 among the urbans in Ohio. Where are we on early literacy?
I believe we are number 1, but I would have to double check.
Okay, so we're number 1 in achievement and we're number 1 in early literacy. And I do believe with the leadership of the superintendent and a whole bunch of folk, I think we have now met state standards for readiness in college, career, and military. So those are big things. The achievement, we've been doing that, and we concentrate on that an awful lot for obvious reasons. The early literacy piece, I'm saying that's in part because of preschool promise for these 10 years or so that we've been at this. And then, of course, the big push in the district has been career tech, tremendous commitment to it. So those are moments that kind of nice sunshine to that report card. And The irony is that we can make an excuse as to why this report card doesn't help us. It's made for the hundreds of suburban districts is what it's made for, of the 607 school districts. And we also look at who our cohorts are. We have the urbans as a cohort. Mike just was telling me who our financial cohorts are. Anybody that's over 10,000, which not only includes the urbans, but then the big suburban districts are our cohorts where we get measured against financially. And then the other cohorts that we have to be looking at is our market. Hamilton County and part of Butler and part of Warren County. That's who we're competing with for kids. So it's an interesting effort that the administration's engaged in, and I applaud what they've been able to do over time and recently.
And just to confirm, we were number one in early literacy for the bigger.
Big dog.
I think maybe the superintendent can probably elaborate a little bit more, but I think the leadership team has a meeting coming up October 24th to have a strategy planning regarding the report card for this current school year, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Crosby. So we have two meetings coming up. One is Friday, and the purpose of Friday is to have members of the senior leadership team, curriculum teams in particular, and the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers talk about our plans. Monday night at the board meeting, we shared with our school board and the public what our instructional plans are for this school year, including some things we have been doing and we feel like we're doing well, and a few new items that we think we need to put in place to get us to that 65 threshold and beyond. And then on the 24th of October, we're doing a very deep dive. And so anyone in our district who touches instructional practices, so whether it is our curriculum director, curriculum managers, reading and math specialists, our district-wide mentors, they are joining us off-site with Mrs. Vargo and other members of her team to do really deep dives into each of the components, because we want to ensure that everyone understands how to define the component and how to make sure our kids are going to be successful in the components. So if there's any hesitation about what it means, because it is a little complex and complicated, we want to make sure we have an understanding of what the expectation is, and that's going to take us a bit of time to get on the same page. So we're headed in that direction.
Any other questions or comments? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much for providing the information. Great job. Okay. Audit updates?
Thank you. So we will switch over to our audit committee dashboard. And while we do so, we have a few brief updates. And again, as we typically go through our audit committee dashboard at a rather high level, but if you have questions on anything in particular, more than happy to deep dive and provide additional context. So starting at the top of our dashboard, I think Rob's just about to hop on there for us. We have the items for, oh no, thank you. We had the items for your all's review. We try our best to provide documents for you all that are just for informational purposes. A lot of those are our financial reports, of course. But again, try to draw your attention to those we really want you to review. So we'll talk about those a bit today. We also made a few updates to our dashboard that we will cover with you as well, and welcome any feedback or suggestions there. So you'll see at the top, under our past meetings, there are a few presentations we'd like to draw your attention to. I think they provide great context, especially the Finance Committee meetings. And then most recently, Treasurer Wagner had her final Board of Education presentation, which I've linked up. Just click on that and it starts right as she presents. And I think it's a great summation of her tenure as our treasurer. And then I had the pleasure of speaking to the board on September 8th and reviewed the full audit plan for the year. And that was a great opportunity to share with the public as well the type of financial and oversight work we do. So moving on to our external audits, you can see those highlighted in green are those that have recently concluded since we last met in July. All of those audits were marked as compliant, many of which are actually, all of which I should say are grants-based. So as we always highlight, we are heavily audited, especially in the grants area, and are very pleased that we continue to receive such stellar feedback. So kudos to the grants team and the treasurer's office for that work. Further, we are currently in the midst of our financial audit led by the Ohio Auditor of State for fiscal year 2025. So in your digital folders, you will find the letter of arrangement with the Ohio Auditor of State. And it's notable that this is the first time in about 10 years that we've had the Auditor of State directly. Historically, it's been outsourced to a third party, Plattenberg. So we believe that their purview and the things they may focus on could differ slightly. And that was why we included the project this year as an advisory work, and have been working to support Kevin Ashley as he gathers all the information and we do some preliminary testing. Joseph is here with our superintendent's name tag. Come on in. Forgive me. No. Thank you, Joseph. I felt so rude, so thank you. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you. So I think, if we have any further questions about the external audit, Kevin is here and I'm sure happy to answer questions as well.
Just quickly, was that unexpected or was that? No. How did that? Okay. And is that just something they sort of rotate through every so often, where they do the audit directly, or?
So when they decide, the state kind of decides based on their staffing and workload. So when they decide to bid it out, I think it's usually for 3 to 5 years. Sometimes they'll do 3 years and then just extend it for 2. So we've been through, 10 years of the outsource. So their current policy, really the last 5 years or more, has been after 10 years, they'll take it back for at least 1 year. And then the team has actually told us that their intent is it will probably go back out next year.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
That's fun for you to
Well,
change it for 1 year and then have to.
and it's a lot of building narratives and learning our process and going through all that. So that's been a little bit more of a challenge this year. If it happens to go back to Plattenberg next year, they'll already be ready to go, so.
Okay.
But they will go through a bidding process and they could decide to hold on to us at the state.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Great. So moving on, I think it's important to pause before we jump into our audit plan. You all received, I believe, the departure and goodbye email from Isaac Karn. So we'll take a moment to celebrate all of the wonderful work that he did. He joined the team as an intern, as a college student, and somehow I got him to stick around with me and build an internal audit department for 6.5 years. So we're incredibly grateful for the time he spent with our team, and to say his shoes are going to be big ones to fill is an understatement. So we shared with you all a memo summarizing our audit staffing plans to fill his position. The short of it essentially is to take his role from a supervisor, which is the level that Emma is as well, and to shift it to a more entry-level position as a specialist auditor, looking for someone 2 to 5 years in experience, ideally who's audited before and can kind of hit the ground running in that regard. However, it allows a little bit more of a difference between transactional level work and slightly, more advanced work that Emma does as a supervisor, and kind of creates that opportunity to lead and coach a younger auditor, which she is more than ready to do, to say the least. And so I think that'll be a great growth opportunity for that employee as well, giving them an upward trajectory. And then taking the extra little bit of difference there in looking for an internal audit intern. We're going to do our best to find an audit intern who can help us this year. However, as you all know, staffing and internships typically take place and they're recruited about a year or more in advance. So we'll do our best to find a student who perhaps could help us part-time while they're in school. So those are our staffing changes, and for the time being. There may be some impact to the audit plan. However, I think we'll get a better sense of that and can share more at the December audit committee meeting. Our goal, of course, is to keep things running business as usual and fulfill the commitment for completing the audit plan and the charges from our audit committee and board for the year. So before I continue, any questions or thoughts in that regard?
Maybe one quick question. Could you remind us the projects that were tagged to Isaac and maybe what the current status of those is, like on ice until there's a replacement, or you guys are pulling double duty?
Yeah, so a little both. So Emma's our new expert in past recommendation tracking. So she'll be covering that right now. The agile auditing was a big project Isaac was involved in. So I've picked up all of that work where he left it. However, the portion that he completed with Justin, our intern, is really complete. It's just, do we want to expand that into other areas? I know when we put our plan together, agile auditing was intended to target those areas identified through our budget impacts work where we may want to do some testing. So I'd say that would be highly contingent upon filling that role to get that testing back up and running in that regard. The budget impacts work, that was another area that was assigned to Isaac. So that is somewhat behind schedule. However, that is going to be my highest priority after audit committee to get that rolling. So I think it's really, in my opinion right now, it's the scope is not able to progress as quickly. However, the sooner we can staff, we can hopefully get those back on target. Great question. Very good. So to just summarize where we are with our projects, as I mentioned, agile auditing, I would say that the first set of work is complete. But where we have been spending more of our time, Emma is focused on the student data project now, working with Jeremy and his team to reconcile the student information systems with what's reported to the state and the impact that that has on our, potentially on our report card and funding and all of the other wonderful things our student data impacts. She's also focused on the HR advisory work, and that also kind of touches into the Ohio Auditor of State focus. So that's kind of a dual project that she's been focused on this past few months. And as I mentioned, I've been focusing on the Ohio Auditor of State work. We've been doing a lot of preliminary testing, specifically around the transportation T reports. And so for my initial review, things are looking good. And hopefully we've been able to turn over the work papers that we put together for the external auditors to just use and reperform. So I'm hopeful that'll save a little bit of time in that regard. So any questions on the audit plan before I turn things over to Emma to talk through our past recommendation status? Okay, great. Well, Emma, the floor is yours.
Awesome. So we can scroll down to the internal audit recommendations tracker section. And you'll notice a lot of changes here. So if you scroll up a little bit, Rob, we broke out the incomplete recommendations by fiscal year into then 2 new groups. So hopefully this gives a little more context. I know this is a big area that the audit committee likes to focus on. Also just a big area in general. So kudos to Isaac for keeping up with this because it's a lot. You'll be able to see the open recs that are not yet due, and then the open recs that are past due. The goal is for folks who have the dashboard link to be able to click into it, and then you guys are able to review at your leisure. I know a Sunday night, nothing else to do. This is definitely what you're going to be looking at. So those are 2 that are broken out from the one that's above, and everything reconciles. I checked 97,000 times at this point. So hopefully that gives a little more context. Like I know we've been talking about for a while, the one that's been open in 2018, you're going to be able to see it on this breakout. And when you scroll down, the days past due breakdown for escalation plan is something Isaac had been working on. So that's still there. I believe, I'm not sure at right this second if you can click in and it'll bring you to the information, but that's the goal. okay, so that does do that. Here you're able to see exactly what is past due and how long it's been past due. And we also added a column in for implementation priority. So if it was something that management deemed low, medium, or high, that's kind of where they were able to add in their say. It depends how they read and took each one of our recommendations. Some that are on the lower side, maybe that's the one that's open from 2018, and it just could be due to staffing. It could be due to system changes, or it could just be different priorities based on the higher level implementation dates. So if we go out of that section, the bigger section below, we broke out then all of the recommendations into their implementation ranking. So you're able to see if it's not due or overdue, what were high and medium or low. So hopefully this also gives a little more context to what each area has within their purview. And eventually, if I can figure it out, once you click into it, you'll be able to have all of that information as well. So the last time in July, I believe there were 9 that were marked complete and then 1 item that went past due. And we've collected all of that information and we'll be following up with management on the past due items that we see. And yeah, I learned this in like 3 weeks. So it's a lot, but I think going forward, hopefully this just gives a little bit more context, because I know we were always getting questions on these areas. Our hope is that once you're able to look at them, if you have a question, you can email us before audit committee or bring your question to audit committee, and then we can go back to management and get more information on that specific area. But this gives you a little direct line to management rather than asking us the question. So I think that is everything with status of past recommendations. Any questions there?
I have maybe one question on
Yeah.
this. The dashboard's amazing, and I really like all the breakouts and how easy it is to see it by area and by aging. But I'm curious, if you take a wider view, quarterly basis, half a year basis, something like that, what, beyond updating the dashboard, how much of your headspace does this, to your team, goes to past findings, remediation of past findings? Is this collecting data from bugging people with emails and then saying, send it to me when it's done, and I'm going to keep bothering you? Or are we actively working towards this as a partner with management? What is the approach?
So I think we're actively working toward this with management. It's hopefully closing that gap between what we can then audit later in the future. What tends to happen is we have these recommendations that might not get complete, or they're just not a priority for management. In this way, we're able to kind of close that gap with them and keep on them without bothering them too much. So everything in the dashboard is automated to send out emails and reminders for them to then go in and update their sections. From there, once it's marked complete, it goes on our list of areas to potentially audit in the future. Once they're able to mark everything complete in that area, we can then recommend next year in planning, okay, HR, has marked everything within their benefits, audit from 2023 complete, let's go back and re-audit and see what it's looking like now. So that kind of helps us narrow down what there is to audit without, we tend to have these conversations and things kind of get lost in translation. Here we have it each and every single time, and we can close the gap at that point.
And so maybe to drill down on that, if I get these quarterly, however often the emails are, the automated emails by the system, I know that it's past due. I'm aware that there was a finding. I have reached a roadblock. I'm not sure how to really implement this change. Am I then actively reaching out to Emma, to Lauren, and saying, I need help? Can you guys help me be creative in how to solve this? Or is there not a lot of back and forth right now?
So they had come up with an escalation schedule, and that's where you're seeing the 0 to 60, I think 60 to 120, and then 120 and beyond. There are certain things that once it hits that point, we will go and have discussions with management. I think the biggest thing that we are working on too this year is the recommendation still applicable? Or have you closed the recommendation or the risk? Have you closed that gap in the risk with something else that you guys have done? So a lot of it is educating management and educating process owners on what is that risk. And maybe we made a recommendation at the time that made sense, but you guys have done something in the past year or 5 years that you've closed it so we can complete it and move forward. And when we go back to audit it, we're not going to audit it the same way because you've updated the process. So a lot of it, I think, is also education.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome, John.
And I might add, I think one of the topics that we've approached, especially in light of budget constraints and resource constraints, is I think we have a few. I'm looking at our folks who fill these out regularly, and we say, quite frankly, this is a lower priority area, and we do not have a resource to do this. Therefore, telling you now, I'm going to continue to mark this as incomplete for the foreseeable future. So we've been trying to throw around some ideas of how do we flag that and maybe put that in a different category so it doesn't keep bouncing as past due, but maybe we all collectively say, okay, that makes sense. We're all on the same page. So Treasurer Gustin might have more to add there.
If I may, I think I have the most things on this list, and probably the most that are overdue. So, but we appreciate internal audit for sure. So I would say there's a couple of buckets. Some of the overdue things are just that we are poor estimators of when we can accomplish things. And so there are some projects that we thought would be much easier, and just scope creep or whatnot has pushed that over. They're actively working on. We know what the solution is. We just don't have the resources at this time to really push through. There's another subset that I think we have struggled with. How do we know it's done? Like a couple of them, for example, are would say train everyone in this population on a new procedure process. Well, that population changes. Our staff is, there's a fairly good staff turnover. So we had to have some discussions, and I brought in audit and said, okay, at some point we have to close this. Like, we have a plan in place, we have a regular training scheduled. We will never hit 100% of people because a person hired yesterday, training's not to the end of the month. But we feel comfortable that our process catches everyone, and so we decided to close those after a long time. And there are some, honestly, like Lauren and I had a conversation this month about there was a recommendation that I thought was overly broad. And I pushed back and said, this is not implementable. And she said, let me give you some feedback, because it was written kind of broad. And I said, okay, based on your feedback, now I think we can develop a plan that meets what you want. But the wording of it was just too big to get around. But I said, if you give me an area, or give me a specific area we can focus on, I'm sure we can come to a conclusion.
And I think that's the perfect example, because our recommendation was written somewhat literally, train everyone, but really the risk was that there wasn't a process and a plan for training. So really, by the fact that they have implemented a plan, they have trainings, they have a regular schedule, our concern is that on a certain day, on a certain day someone isn't trained, but there is a mechanism and a process in place for training. So I think it's some of those nuances, and we appreciate the depth in this, direct implementation that management tries to have, but it goes to Emma's point. Sometimes we're more actually saying what was the risk that we're dealing with. So we're working through some of those nuances.
So in those instances where there is an overestimation of actually completing those tasks, does the clock then change? I mean, do you go back and then decide, okay, well, we were a little ambitious, but this is the actual time frame that we think we can complete that?
And that's the part I think we need to think through now that this process has run for about a year or so, is what we started with this escalation plan, I think, rolling out in April. And maybe that next level is let's earmark these, bring them back to the audit committee and board. And if we all management, internal audit committee members feel comfortable, maybe we either allow a new date to be set, or we, set those aside. I think I just hesitate to say, let's set a new date, because that kind of undermines the accountability priority unless there is good reasoning and we all are in agreement. So I think maybe that's our next to-do and step for us to brainstorm on what that may look like.
I think one of the things to highlight or just to think about as well is that where we started from with the number of long-term unfilled or uncompleted or incomplete recommendations to where we are now is a tremendous step. And I think that as part of that is in part being able to digest and set tracks and set plans to get them, but also bringing them back to the attention. I think one of the things that I maybe wonder about or inquire about is the idea that we have some things that part of the reason that they're not completed is because there is not the mechanism to complete those tasks, right? Because we gave recommendations at a time when, the recommendation is, all right, we'll come up with this, have this implemented, and there's no system that can be there to implement. The first step is to create the system. And if that's still working through its processes, that goal will not be met for a substantial period of time. And I think one of the things that may be helpful for us as a committee to sometimes review or think about or maybe put into a different box are those things from which they're making steps, but there's something underlying that is required first to be completed. Because I think that's the one thing that I've noticed in some of the stuff we've had on the list for a long time, and that we've seen progress, but maybe not to the level of which to say we're ready to mark it off, or we're even really ready to have the conversation about when would we be able to mark it off. Because we're still trying to figure out what will be the right system to make it work, or what's the right process or procedure to make it work. So I think that just maybe the next, as you all are developing more information, as you're gathering more information, and we're able to cross more things off the list, it's like, what are those things that are still on there that'll be on there for a while, so that we're not asking you in a year from now, why is this one still on there? When the reality is that it's going to be on there for at least a year or two, or year or 3 or 4, because of where they are in developing those systems and procedures.
I think that's a good point. When you talk about these processes, I think a lot of times we want to just jump in and just, get it done. We don't really think about the steps that it takes to get there. And it sounds like to me, and I'm a new member, but it sounds like we need to have process maps to kind of map these things out before we just jump head first in and try to do these things. And I think Mike made a good point when he talked about scope creep. A lot of times things come up and we want to, we have to do this. We have to do this. And we don't realize that maybe we can do this, but it has to be phase 2 of the project or phase 3 of the project. So I think what we need to do is take a step back, start setting some goal dates, that we want to meet, and then, do some check-ins, have some efficacy checks. If you have a recommendation that's been made, have an efficacy check and see if it's been done. And if it hasn't been done the way that you think it should be done, then you go back and you address that. But I think what it sounds like is we have this whole big bucket of things that we have to do, but we have to prioritize those and say, okay, we're going to get 5 done this year, as opposed to trying to address all 500 at one time.
Yeah.
I was just curious, of the uncompleted recommendations, which ones, and this is really a question for the internal audit team, which ones are like the highest risk that are keeping you up at night that haven't been completed? Are there any, or are these things that are just can take their time to get resolved?
So I think if we go into that breakout, that one, we can see in real time which ones we in management had ranked as higher priority. I believe most of them, if my smart sheet will load, end up being with benefits, which we've had many discussions about at this point. And then there were a few with P card and transportation. So those were I would agree with management if they think those are the highest priority. Those are most likely the highest priority ones that we would want to see closed out eventually. but you'll be able to see within this tracker their update and what they've kind of said toward that progress. Some of them is they've hired, like transportation, I can see right now, they've hired a new director. They're going through that new process with them. And hopefully once she's in place and able to get a grip on the world of transportation, that will then eventually close. I think for the past like year or two, that kind of was a back and forth with that position. Benefits, I've had many discussions with them the past 2 months that I've been back, and they've gone through in real detail and come up with a plan to close out the remaining open items under their purview, and then a timeline in which they'll go through and kind of audit themselves. We'll be able to have a discussion about them with that audit, and hopefully eventually down the line go back and audit that area as well. But it gives us good context when they're able to go through and rank themselves, because they know their areas the best, which ones they should hopefully be looking to close out first rather than the lower priorities.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies. Next, we have the financial discussion and forecast by Michael Dustin.
Put the microphone between Kevin and I so we can tag team here. On Monday, we did present the budget and 3-year forecast, what's formerly known as the 5-year forecast, to the board. I'm not sure how many folks watched the riveting presentation that Kevin gave. Sure some. I know Lauren always includes the links and always does a good job of adding calendar invites. So just to very quickly summarize, looking at this year's budget and forecast, at this point, we're trending about $5 million below where we had projected for revenue. Couple of factors there. The biggest one, the biggest hit is in property taxes. So the delinquency rate went up. So that was unexpected. There's some big reappraisals. There's also some push on some of the utility properties are at a lower rate. They're appealing their appraisal. So until the appeals settle, they get to pay the lower amount. So hopefully those things bounce back as we get into next year's tax collections. So that would be good. Otherwise, things are on track for the most part. Would you say, Kevin? Yeah. And then the second half of that is we shared a couple things. One, we shared an early target for next year. So we anticipate very flat revenues. Anticipate next year's budget target will be $634.2 million. So that's about $500,000 less than this year, but very flat overall, which I think is a good thing. And we can talk if you want about some threats to that, but at that point, that's where we're looking. And then obviously we forecast out the other out years so that we can file with the state. I mean, one of the nice things is that our board has committed to keeping expenditures in line with revenue. And so a lot of districts forecast, if you look, are kind of this falling off a cliff where their cash balances fall off a cliff in years going out as we go further out. We do not have that. I will say, though, that when we did the forecast, one of the things that we were able to point out is because the levy on the ballot in November is renewal, we have to show the forecast without that, and it gets put into a column below. And you can really see the impact. We go negative cash in 28 without the levy, right, Kevin? Yeah, as early as fiscal year 28, so 2 fiscal years now, we run out of cash without that levy. So that's why it's so important, that we keep that in the forefront for this year. Just even though it's a renewal, we count on that funding to stay steady. Did you have anything you want to add?
Yeah. The only thing, and I know Mike has mentioned this before, with the change in the law, we cannot go for a renewal after this November. So it would have to be new money levy if it were not to renew. It would lose the homestead and rollback contributions from the state as well. So it makes it even more imperative, because typically we have about a year to get the renewal in place. So normally in the past, you say, okay, well, if it doesn't pass the first time, we can just turn around and try again, and hopefully the voters will change their mind. But in this case, this is kind of a one-shot deal with the renewal, and then we would have to look at other options just to keep that same amount of revenue.
Probably a good spot to stop for questions on that part. And I do want to talk briefly about House Bill 186. Well, so are there any questions on the forecast itself? Okay. See, Kevin, you did such a good job. Such an excellent job. One of the threats to our funding that I want to make people very aware of, I talked about this Monday, and I'll talk about it Saturday, and we're going to keep talking about it until it gets some traction. So there are a series of bills pending in the Ohio legislature under what they call property tax reform, and there are a bunch of them. And some of them are more likely than others. This one seems pretty likely to get through in some semblance. And with the House Bill 186, and the idea behind it is that it takes school districts who are on the 20 mil floor, and we're one of them. And when there are property tax reappraisals, what it looks to do is reduce the amount of increase in revenue a school district would get. Because when you're on the 20 mil floor, when there's a reappraisal, we do get some additional money because we hit that floor, so we get additional revenue. And it's somewhat based on the increase in property tax values. So what House Bill 186 looks to do is look at inflation over the same period. So in Ohio, your property values are reassessed every 3 years. There's a reappraisal every 6, and then there's what's called a triennial update that comes in between. But in effect, you get a new value for your house every 3 years. House Bill 186 says, okay, let's look at inflation in that same 3-year period and give the taxpayers a credit so the school district, the rate of money the school district increases won't be more than inflation. So it ties property values to inflation, which we can talk about why that's a bad decision and different thing. But we've always looked at that as a future issue, right? Standard House Bill 186 introduced was always a future thing. So we knew when we went to do a reappraisal, we would get less money than we could have gotten, and maybe that was $5 million in 1 year, maybe $10 million another year, but you really didn't know because you don't know how much property values are going to increase into the future, and you don't know how much inflation is going to be over that same future period, especially in the current times. Both of those things are out of traditional norms. So, but we always said, okay, well, it's a future problem you have to deal with. We'll get some additional money, just not as much as we should have. The new substitute House Bill 186 now takes that law and applies it retroactively. So now it looks to go back 2 years, which would hit our last reappraisal. And I think our property values went up 30-some% last reappraisal. I mean, it was a big one. It was a big reappraisal. So if this passes as written, the substitute bill as written right now, the current version, we would lose $14 million immediately, and then we would lose $25 to $28 million over each year of the next 2 fiscal years. This would be an immediate, huge impact on our revenue. And so this is why I'm telling everyone who will listen, now's the time to reach out to your legislators. Now's the time to start making contacts, and if nothing else, please ask them to take out this retroactive portion of the bill. There's some discussion that it's unconstitutional. I've heard that because you're looking backwards, and a lot of times it's retroactive laws. There's lots of issues with those. But I think anyone who has an opportunity, ask them please to take out the retroactive portion, even if they support the bill as a whole.
I don't know what the difference in options are or types of organizations, but I know this year the library has reached out to the public and provided a very succinct, easy form for people to contact their legislators when there were threats to library funding. Is that an option for CPS that they can contact a large group of people and say, press this button and ask your legislators this, because it seems like it was successful for some of the library funding threats that they had.
Yeah, I know in the budget process, we did do a letter campaign, and we pushed that out on the district's website, and I think through some of the district's social media channels, and made it, and had some sample letters, had here's the legislatures, here's their addresses, here's how to contact them. I know we've done that. I don't think we've done a push campaign like that.
I mean, yeah, the only reason I bring it up is because it was like, well, however they structured it, it was very easy. It took like 30 seconds to do it. And then, we received feedback later that it was successful. So it felt like, oh, I did a good thing. That was a good 30 seconds. So that,
And I
just
will
for what
say
that's
this,
worth.
like, those letters matter. I mean, I've talked to several current legislators in my work here, and all of them have said, like people don't understand letters, emails, they make a difference. Those get read, there's a pulse, they're looking for the pulse of the community. And so reaching out really does matter.
I was just gonna share, so last year Treasurer Wagner and I both wrote letters to give to our constituents, asking them to put their signature and forward it on. I have had opportunities to meet with many community groups to ask them in person to do the same. I'm so sorry. And then finally, specifically, we had several engagement sessions last year, one at different parts of the city, one at Pleasant Ridge Montessori. Representative Isaacson came down and helped us out, sharing his perspective and giving suggestions for what the public could do. We also had Cedric Denson at one, and then we also had Catherine Ingram at a third session. So we do plan to continue to do that this year. I feel like we've been very supported by the legislators close to us. And so I don't think that's a difficult ask, so I appreciate you bringing that up.
I just want to point out, I think Treasurer Gusson brings up a great point with this one, but I think it's also just part of a concerted effort. And so what we have to recognize is this is not the only bill that's going through Congress right now to affect how schools are funded. And most of them, at least what we're seeing right now, are really focused around that idea of the 20 mil floor and ways to affect how schools are able to bring in resources and bring in levies. And, part of it, I think there is a measure of success that can come from kind of the letter writing campaigns and the pressure mounting campaigns. I think we may also want to start thinking about is our ways to collaborate with some of our areas like our rural communities and some of the other areas that would also be affected by some of these changes that are not there's have some of the unintended consequences, right? So if we are really encouraging those folks who are in other areas that, may not have historically thought they were going to be the target of some of this, who then become subjected to it. And I think that's where we did see a lot of effort with regard to especially libraries and communities where the library was like the only source of internet for a community, or was the only source of space where students could go and learn outside of school. It became like, oh, wait a minute, they're going to close and we don't have that resource. And that made a lot of state reps have to change their thought process around that. I think the other thing I would say is that we will have some challenges we'll be facing, especially with some of our other levies already, that have questions of technically what does the bill that they passed for the budget actually say, and the overturned vetoes actually mean when it comes to how some of our levies will work when they come back up again. And I think there were some recommendations made by the property tax committee that probably were not anywhere near in alignment to what would be helpful for schools. But what it will also mean is in future years, there's going to be a need to have kind of a very strong presence about what CPS means and why the community here may have to share more of that burden than they necessarily would probably expect to. And that's in large part because the state's not providing. So I think there is both the effort, the need to kind of communicate with the state legislature, but it's also the need to talk with our local community and provide them with a viewpoint of the district in a way that encourages them to support and continue to be thinking about ways to support us. And then there are also, the third thing I'll say to that is that there are going to be things that, true to this committee, that we've been focusing on about how does the audit committee and internal audit actually work to improve how the district operates in a way that would be the potential cost savings, because I think this is even more critical to say, what are the ways that we are trying to become more efficient and more effective? And how does the audit committee help with that? How does the audit team work to improve that process, to demonstrate the value? Because I think that's the other part, is that we can go out and we can say we have clean audits, but what does a clean audit mean? And to a parent who is not paying attention to audit committee meetings, we know that many do. We know that we have high viewership. But for those folks who are not, we have to be able to communicate why the work that is done here, why the work that's being done in the district, why allow the district to operate in a more fiscally smart way, in a way that is more consistent with being effective and efficient with our dollars, if we're going to make the ask of them in future years for more. And I think that's the one struggle we're going to have, is that we have to both do it on the academic side, but then also do it on how do we operate as a district? Because the narrative that's being put out is that districts are just basically sitting around with all these extra dollars, and that if they go by and take these measures on levies, that, oh, those extra dollars are just sitting on, will come back to you as a homeowner. And the truth is that we have never operated on all these extra dollars at some other parts of the state where they're having these 60 and 70% carryovers, 100% carryovers. We don't operate in that fashion. And so it doesn't just hit those districts where it's large pools that they can pull from.
Any other questions, comments? Yeah, I like the idea of the proactive nature of communicating to folks on, this is where we are today, and this is what we have in front of us. If we don't go in the right direction, this is the impact and what it could look like. And I think, again, I'm always an advocate for being proactive. So having the conversations early now, I think would serve the district well. Oh, I thought it was a question. All right. Okay.
Maybe just one more point on the operational efficiencies and kind of driving that value proposition. I do think that, not to put more pressure on this team, but that's where the internal audit team, you have such a unique perspective, being able to take the long view of the organization, that, you know, I would really challenge you and use us as a resource as well, but to continue to be creative. And, you know, it's helpful to have somebody reviewing your process who's separate from it and can always suggest, you know, is that really the most efficient way, delicately, to do things? And so continue to flex that muscle, because that's how we're going to be able to show that we can give back to the district.
You set us up perfectly, John, because when we were talking through the audit committee goals and the value statement, Emma did a project last year focused on KPI and ROI of internal audit and what does that look like. So we were thinking for the December 10th meeting, we could do a presentation, taking that work and kind of updating a little bit based on our current conversations and brainstorming with you all as to how we want to measure and then therefore communicate the value of audit. And I think that really all ties in with the audit committee as well as the greater goal. So if that's agreeable to the committee, we can tentatively put that on the agenda for discussion in December.
I see head nods. Yes. Okay. Thank you. So we're at any other business? Is there any other business that we needed to discuss today? No? Okay. At our time, okay. All righty, so the next meeting will take place on Wednesday, December 10th, here at 4:30 PM. Do we have to do a motion to adjourn? Yes. So I would will entertain any motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make a motion.
All righty. Second?
Second.
I'll be ready to go.
Is that too fast?
Right. No, not at all. Do we have to do a roll call? No? Okay, well, the